Hello everybody and welcome to Sonic Talk number 360. That's right, I think we're 5 days off, 5 episodes off, being able to listen to an episode of Sonic Talk every single day of the year, if that's the sort of thing that you would like to do. It could be something that you could do. So I guess that's a milestone. 5 off a year, that's astonishing. Thank you very much to one of our chatties for pointing that out last week. There's the chat room in full. We've got everybody there. Thank you very much for joining us. It's always good to have a fulsome chat room, as I'm supposed to say every week. So let's crack on. Obviously, this week we've got a winner for the Isotope competition. Isotope are sponsoring the show. I want to say thank you very much to them for their continued sponsorship of the show. And we've got a full panel as well. So why don't we just get straight in and start introducing them? That would seem to be the done thing. Dave Spears, GForceSoftware.com, makers of fine musical software, musical instruments, and hoarders of the electronic vintage kind. As I keep teasing him about, and he looks like, I don't know what you mean, but you are looking guilty, and so you should be. How are you?
Really guilty. We got a whole load turning up tomorrow.
Oh.
I don't know where it's going to go. Anyway, yes, thank you. Yes, nice to be here. Nice to see you.
I'm glad you for joining us this sunny day. Is it sunny where you are? I think it's nearly sunny here, but
it's really hot in here. My fan on the laptop has kind of gone into overdrive mode, and I've just kind of picked it up, and it's really hot.
It's melting the Formica underneath your.
It's actually resting on 2 A to Z of analog synthesizer books, and they are really hot. So if it combusts,
what a way to go, though, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Dave Spears, thank you very much for joining us. I'm hitting in sort of dark. I didn't really turn all the lights on today. I just sort of was feeling a bit dingy, so that's the way I'm going to stay just for now. But yes, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll also go over to, well, let's cross the pond and say Mr. Rich Hilton. Hi to Rich Hilton. Rich Hilton, of course, is keyboard player with Chic, travelling the globe at the drop of a hat or guitar or plectrum or USB stick, and also mans the controls for Nile Rodgers' private studio where they work on a huge variety of musical projects. How are you, Rich?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. You're just a tiny bit quieter than usual, Rich. I don't know if that's me or you, but my faders are in the same place. I know I've spent the entire pre-show saying I haven't touched anything, but honestly, I haven't.
Yeah, you did. Well, I can certainly give you a bit more.
That would be awesome. But anyway, how are you? Are you well?
Yes, thank you. Very well.
Jolly good. I think there's some noise gating going on. That's what it sounds like to me. Let me just.
I hear what I was describing to you earlier back again. Yes.
That's right. Maybe it's just one of those bad Skype days. I don't know why that might be. I don't touch the channels for this setup at all. But anyway, Rich, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're having exciting times where you are. I guess you're probably warming up for a whole slew of festival gigs with Chic, right?
Yeah, there's some gigs coming up.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Well, anyway, maybe we'll see you this side of the pond. Our annual meet-up somewhere. You playing in Bristol again?
No, we're not playing in Bristol that I know of. We're playing 2 other places, the names of which escape me. One is outside of London to the north and east, and the other one is north of Birmingham, a festival called V Festival.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's what I recall at the moment. There may be more, but there's not a Bristol right now.
Ah, well, I'll just have to drive further. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Rich. A pleasure to have you aboard. Now we'll go over to, let's go and say hi to Gaz Williams, who's there in Bristol. Gaz, of course, professional bass player, music producer, a lot of mastering engineer, gazwilliams.me, and music technologist and co-host of the excellent Sonic Touch podcast. How are you, Gaz?
Yeah, good, thank you. Been very, very busy, so that's always good. But doing lots and lots of work, music work. I'm trying to learn Bitwig.
Yes, Gaz, of course, going to be doing a bit of Bitwig action for us at some point in the near future. Something to watch out for, I might add.
Yes. So yeah, so that's been I've been trying to do some of the work that I've had to been doing in Bitwig. So
okay.
Really putting it into, really putting it through its paces.
That's very brave, considering we're talking about a version 1 software release, mate. I appreciate you taking that diligence, I must say.
Mm-hmm. No, but yeah, lots of opinions, that's for sure.
Excellent. Well, we'll stay tuned for that very soon. Thank you very much. And of course, we'll now rock over to Mr. Mark Tinley, who's there, looking like a professional broadcaster. Like you got a little voiceover studio there.
That's very BBC.
You've even got the clock in the background and everything. That's awesome.
I've got the chins as well, and the cheeks.
I think there must be quite a delay from where you are, because it says 9 minutes past there and it says 11 minutes past here. So I don't know what that is about, but
that's very odd, because I'm on the Swiss atomic clock.
Must be my clock.
Look, I'm doing a tarot reading for the show. I'm going to see let's see what we've got. The sun dancers. Look at that. We can be the sun dancers today.
I'll take it.
Got to do this. I'm in Glastonbury, you see, so I have to be esoteric and everything.
Are you brushing up on all your New Age skills now you've moved there? Is that you're taking the mandatory course in New Agedom?
I guess. I mean, I don't really need to do. I just, all I've got to do is walk onto the high street, and I'm overwhelmed with everyone else's New Age skills, and because I understand lots of the terminology, I can just kind of weave in.
Excellent. Blending chilling
I'm sure
like a
I'd
resident.
If I chose to do readings, actually tarot readings or runes, or to do Reiki or energy healing or any of that, I'd make a lot more money than I do making by being a musician. So
maybe you need to combine the two.
This space, I might just jump ship.
Well,
it's a growth area.
We'll still have you aboard, whatever. We still want you for whatever happens. So thank you very much, Mark. Right,
thank you.
Let's start, shall we? I've got this pretty cool instrument. I think it plays some audio. This is the sample modeling Swarm engine, and this is Flutes, which I think it's actually going to say something in a minute. I hope so, because there doesn't seem to be any noise.
No, I would have said something by now.
It would have, wouldn't it? No.
Oh, look at that.
It is very expressive, I must say. There's a bit later on, which I'm going to get to as well, because he plays, the gentleman in question, plays with a breath controller, and it really does. Let me see if I can fast forward it a bit to where, yeah, here we go. This is controlling Mac with breath control, and it's astonishing. Anyway, that's really, I mean, where I was coming from with this is the new sample modeling product called Flutes, and it's actually quite an interesting mixture of sampling and something that they call, now what do they call it? They call it synchronous wavelength acoustic modeling, developed by Stefano Lucato, and they've got a whole suite of instruments, including an amazing tenor sax, which I'll play a bit later on as well. Some awesome demos on this. I mean, okay, you might not need a flute so much in these non-jazz fusion jazz funk days, but it was pretty authentic, do you not think? Rich, I'm going to go to you, because you probably recorded flutes, and the whole interest that the idea of sort of modelled instruments that are becoming more and more expressive and closer. I mean, it's only going to get better, surely, as we develop techniques to actually control them, I suppose.
Well, that sounded good to me. And I liked the variety of articulations he could get with the breath controller.
Yeah, breath controller is
I'm sorry. When he played it straight from the keyboard, it sounded kind of keyboardy to me.
Yeah.
At that point, the attack of it's almost like D50, where the attack is very realistic, and then what follows is somewhat static unless you unstatic it.
Right. With the help of the expression, I think it's one of those things. In fact, there's a lot of demos on their site where they're using iwi controllers, their wind controllers, to get the most out of them, and that they are incredibly expressive. as well. I mean, you can get. I mean, if you know what you're doing, I suppose. I mean, that's the thing. You need to learn how to play. But they incorporate obviously the breath controller as well. This thing is. It's about €200. It's €229. So it's not what you consider an amazingly cheap instrument. But I'm guessing if you're doing a lot of, if you need flute and you can't afford a flute player, it's probably cheaper than a session. I don't know. Gaz, would you got much experience with modelled instruments?
Well, Piano Tech, when that came out, I was doing a project which was involving triggering piano sounds using percussion MIDI. And when Piano Tech came out, the difference in how enjoyable it was to play with Piano Tech compared to sample-based pianos, it felt like, because every note I was hitting was being created rather than just triggering some other moment in time, that the sample was. The fact that everything kind of was being created in real time. I don't know. For me, it made it amazing. So I've become a big fan of models, much more than sample based. But I think Piano Tech and the various other Piano Tech expansions are really good as well. There's like a Fender Rhodes and a Whirly. I suppose the thing with modeling and with that like Piano Tech thing, maybe just a snapshot if you listen to it from a listener perspective, the sample based piano might sound more realistic, but from a playing perspective, just the fact that it's an organic and reactive instrument. Now I'm assuming that flute would have a similar feel to it. I'd need to try it, but yeah, just to answer your question, yeah, I've played around with a lot of modeling stuff over the years, and I'm very interested in it.
It's interesting what you say about Piano Tech and the fact that when you're playing it, it has, maybe it's not the fully realistic, or maybe it's become more so. But I guess you could use something like that to actually perform with, and then play it back via a different sample library. I don't know, Dave. You make modelled instruments, albeit electronically. The nuance that you can get acoustically. I mean, I'm guessing there are similar. Probably under the hood stuff that we don't know that goes on in your instruments that require responses that are of a similar nature, right?
Well, I mean, what we do is component modelling, which is obviously slightly different to physical modelling. Physical modelling would be where you would, it's all about measurements, effectively. So you would measure certain parameters, and then you would factor that into the kind of equation. This looks like a kind of hybrid, really, of... Obviously, it's sample-based at the core, but then it looks like they've got some kind of sample manipulation, probably resynthesis system. I'm assuming that they're calling modelling, and that you would basically analyse the changes between different samples recorded at different intervals and different spaces and different octaves and all this kind of stuff, and then kind of interpolate them between those. And it's interesting for me because all of this tends to fly or fall on the strength of the player, and things like where he had the breath controller. I mean, I've seen this amazing video. This guy, I think is Jean-Philippe Reichel, a keyboard player, who's just playing one of those little Yamaha CSO1s with a breath controller, and he seems to kind of climb in the instrument, and he makes this tiny little weedy, normally weedy little Yamaha monosynth sound absolutely amazing. And for me, that's the kind of the real trick, where he's doing the flutter tonguing and stuff like that. That really brings out the kind of expression in the instrument, and that's the player.
It's interesting. The CSO1 was very much, I remember it back in the day, it was very much sold on the breath controller aspect to it, wasn't it? They came as a pair, or did you get it as an accessory? But it was the idea, it's a little tiny synth. It was a strap-on kind of thing, wasn't it? That you would have have your tube going in it as well, and then you would have that breath controller going on too. I forgot about
little mini keys, and I mean, if you want to buy a breath controller now, well, in fact, you even had the option to put them into DX7s and stuff like that. But obviously, it would depend, where it's routed to and all that kind of stuff. Which this looked like it had kind of been pre-organized for you. But they are. I mean, if you want a kind of unused, because let's face it, no one wants a heavily used breath controller on eBay. You're probably talking, $100 plus.
Really,
yeah.
For a breath controller?
Yeah,
that's interesting because you can get the eWiis, which have got breath control in them. The Akai do one, and Yamaha do and it's not an iwi. They do one as well, which is like a, I guess, saxophone fingering kind of thing, and that gives you all of that stuff. I'll tell you a bit about that in a bit. Actually, I'll just come to Mark as well. Modelled instruments. I'm guessing because I mean you're heavily into the whole. Oh gosh, I've forgotten what it's called. The reverb convolution. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
So modelling. I imagine modelling does appeal to you. Did you ever have any of the Casio stuff? Did they do modelling? Was there a VL?
No, but I'll tell you what we had. We had a Yamaha VL1 in 1994, so that must be 20 years ago, I suppose. And that was really good, actually. But where it fell down was that nobody could play the damn thing. So it sounded like a saxophone, and there was other wind instruments, like a lovely bassoon, like a really lovely toned bassoon. But
not a lot of use for it. 20 years ago in music, I'd imagine bassoons and flutes.
No, we used it on the Medazzaland album, actually.
Oh, right, okay.
We used it quite a lot for all sorts of different things. I mean, Duran Duran Rio, that's all about saxophone, isn't it? So
I suppose so.
There was, various saxophone players come and go and do things, or we try to emulate it with synthesizers, and I mean, it kind of had a nice tone to it, but it just sounded really static and flat.
Right, God.
And when you sample somebody playing in a saxophone, even if they try to make it sound static and flat so you can turn it into a library that people can then manipulate, the player is always going to put some kind of signature on that sound, and then samplers, good samples of it, are players who've put a good signature on it, and poor samples of saxophones are probably ones with no signature at all that sound like they need some kind of breath control or some kind of, it's dynamics, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right there.
The way a wind instrument changes so dramatically with dynamics that if you haven't got that, then you might as well do
it with your voice.
That little emulator. No, the emulator 2 sample that Peter Gabriel.
The Shakuhachi, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a little element of that when he brought the breath controller out. I had to say I didn't want to bring it up, but I think
somebody has to learn to play it to make it work. And then when they learn to play it, like Dave says, the expressivity of it brought to the sound, bringing expressiveness to the sound means that the sound doesn't actually have to be quite as good as a sample. So it's I mean, and if those things come up in neck and neck, then maybe this thing's gonna be really something. But I mean, it sounded good to me when he was playing it off the keyboard. When he played it with the breath controller, what he was playing to me sounded less like something I would expect a flute to play. But then I don't listen to enough. I suppose a bit
over-expressive, is it? If there's any over-expressing, sounds like something that.
I don't listen to enough of that particular musical scale he played. Sounded like the sort of, what's it called? Jazz fusion,
yes, there's that. Just quickly,
I don't listen to that really. Sorry.
No, in the chat room, Andy Keys said that his mate had a VL1. He paid $4,000 for it. So I mean that's going some. I don't know if that was new. I know they were very expensive. There's a rack
that's really popular. I can't remember what that is, but there was a polyphonic version which was a VP1, and they only made such a tiny amount of these. They are going for an absolute fortune now.
They must have had quite a lot.
They made like 5 or something.
Wow. No, that's
really.
Yeah, it was insane.
Because one of them was on stage with us in Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think the Yamaha thing that we had was a VL1, and it was a rack. I'm sure it was a VL1.
Did it have a teak finish?
Yeah.
Oh, did you get to play it?
The keyboard version had teak finish on it.
Did you get to play it, Rich? Or
hear
it?
Did you play the polyphonic one?
I didn't play it. Philippe Sace, who was playing with Chic at the time, played it magnificently and used the breath controller with it, and it was great.
It's interesting that a breath controller hasn't really because this is something we shot a couple of weeks ago. We shot, as I think I said, a piece with Will Gregory and the Moog Ensemble. And 2 of the players were playing with iwi instruments. Will was playing the Mini Moog, and there was another chap, I forget his name now, he was playing the Arturia Mini Brute. And the level of expression that brought to the party if you close your eyes and you were sort of immersed, it actually sounded like brass or woodwind instruments were playing those parts because of the level of control. And that was the thing that was really... that's what I suppose the thing is, as keyboard players, we tend not, we tend to, maybe a sustain pedal and a volume knob, generally speaking. That extra expression that you get with even just a volume pedal is, really actually very powerful, and something that I'd certainly haven't explored very much. I know, Rich, I'd imagine you probably are more likely to use it, because in a live situation, you need to be much more in control of your dynamics very quickly.
Well, I might be, but I never have. Excuse me. But what I think this calls up is how distancing ourselves from the vibration, which I've talked about before. One of the prices we pay is an incredibly narrow range of articulations from which we're drawing. And so now we present music that has a much more limited range of articulations than the music that was presented 50 years ago.
Yeah, even just by playing, I guess electronic music.
Because everything's triggered. Everything is got a start that's been proscribed prior to your getting there. And if anything, you're translating velocity to attack time so that you can soften it up when you want to. But still, the range of articulations is much less.
It's actually,
given that distance between us and the vibration. When you're touching the vibration or blowing the vibration or whatever, if you're part of the vibration, you have a tremendous range of articulation available to you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think the other thing is obviously trying to get that level expression programmed into generally a sort of synth-style keyboard requires a much greater degree of control than perhaps an expression pedal or a foot pedal. I know, Gaz, you've been looking at the Sonus, not Wahoo, but the volume pedal. Have you found that you've been using expression? I mean, I guess if you're playing like a bass, you've got built-in expression because you're connected to the instrument, so you don't have the same kind of disconnection that you would with maybe a synthesizer or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very interested in this topic. With the MIDI bass stuff that I play, the GR55 is good in that respect because you can set up a nuance value. And the nuance value is like a modulator that you sort of effectively trigger with your playing dynamics. So when you start to map that stuff around, and you have to play with the sensitivity quite a lot, so the sensitivity matches your own sort of playing. And I think that that's something that a lot of players don't spend enough time doing when they're a player of one instrument and they're trying to sort of learn. They're trying to use some sort of MIDI. It's just really, I think it is quite time consuming setting the sensitivity right. When you get the sensitivity absolutely spot on, then it becomes an extension, then you can really channel that player expression through your instrument.
I think I'd like to find a way of maybe trying breath controller in an analog sense and doing that, because I think that would be something that would be quite interesting. I think Will had it mapped to the filter, so the filter just kind of opens depending on whatever the technique he was using on the Iwi. I forget, he had the Yamaha one. But he's also an incredibly talented saxophonist, which you perhaps wouldn't know. Has been world class kind of concert sort of standard, so his ability to play the instrument is probably greater than any of us, or certainly myself anyway, but it really made a massive difference to the way that it all sounded. I know, Dave, did you because you've seen that Moog Orchestra, I don't think they were using Iwis last time they played, but I think on this round of gigs which are coming up they are, and it's quite interesting. I mean, you're surrounded by electronic instruments. I mean, are you using CV pedals or any of that sort of thing to add extra expression, or do you just stick your finger on the filter?
Yeah, no, I do use a lot of expression pedals. I find it's really neat to use things like expression pedals and obviously breadth controllers and stuff like that, and then just put them all through a massive maximizer. Just completely eliminate everything you've spent 4 hours on doing and just maximize it all. No, but there's one real key thing here, and that is you need to, when you are trying to play like a flautist or a cellist or a guitarist from a keyboard perspective, you need to understand the sensibility of that instrument, because it's the way certain scales and certain chords are played. And I used to watch guitarists kind of absolutely massively all the time and ask them to break down chords and stuff, and then I'd kind of copy them, and as a result, you know, I'm playing chords that have got like a huge expanse on them, which for a guitarist is kind of no effort at all, but from a keyboard perspective is very, very different. And I think that's the real trick if you want to really emulate stuff. All the expression and everything is great, but if you don't study that instrument and understand how it's played, it's just going to sound like a kind of badly played version of it.
So you're the guy who plays all those lead guitar solos, are you, on the MIDI on the workstations? You've been working it all out.
I just sent you a video on that, didn't I?
Yes, you made that.
No.
Mark wanted to come in.
Yeah, I work out all my guitar parts on the guitar, and then I transpose the inversions that I have on the guitar to the keyboard. But then I also play keyboards on the guitar with a MIDI guitar, so all of my keyboard inversions are really weird. So if you listen to some of the, like Medazoland is a really good album, or the one that came after that, lots of the keyboard inversions are really weird. You'd need massive fingers to play them because they're all sort of upside down.
Well, that's good.
Can I just talk about one other modelling thing?
Yeah,
actually?
sure.
There was a Technics keyboard. We got this Technics keyboard in the middle of the 90s, and it had all these different building blocks, and you could have, you'd start with I think it had a resonator and a sort of a sound source. So you could start with a reed or a string or a hammer or a pluck or whatever, and you could build these kind of hybrid instruments. And I always, in my imagination, I imagined that like blowing a guitar string through a grand piano would sound like utterly amazing, and I'd be able to create all these things like like all those kind of prepared piano kind of sounds, but that sounded like flutes were the source of that, or saxes or whatever, and it was just rubbish. And I wish somebody would just recreate that concept, and maybe it did work like it would have worked in the real world, and if I went and did those things, they would also sound a bit rubbish. But I would guess not, because Diego Stocco is an example of creating really interesting instruments in the real world and then recording them and making fabulous sounds with them. But if somebody could make that work like my imagination, so I could imagine that I put like a Bosendorfer piano over a cellist kind of input, and like, I've got like, I want it to be like a pedal board with all these different blocks, and I can just drop a block in and it changes the sound, and I can play it from the guitar or the keyboard and just sort of have these, because synthesis has come so far, hasn't it? And it needs to kind of burst out into somewhere new now. We've had the granular time stretchy stuff. We can time travel literally within our sounds. We need to like now create like a new landscape or a new environment or something like, and then again, Iris is mind blowing, but I'm talking about, something in addition to that, but in a slightly different direction. Things that we can physically model our own building blocks and experiment with them.
Well,
it's interesting.
I've got good news.
Have you?
There's a product by Applied Acoustics called String Studio that purports and on some level does what you're describing. It doesn't have an infinite number of sources on which to draw.
I was very excited by that. I was very excited by that piece of software, and I tried it a while ago. So unless it's vastly improved, it's still not quite going where my imagination is going.
Well, it's just what was called to mind as you described what you were after, because that's as close as I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Although Diego's descriptions could work like that. What Diego described with using convolution might work well in that regard.
No, that's interesting. There's a lot.
I've tried that, and it doesn't really work.
There's a lot there's a lot of chat room action talking about the Technics WSA1, which I don't know at all, but I'm guessing that must be some sort of modeling keyboard synthesizer. Apparently the X-Files was done on it, amongst many other things. I can't familiarize myself with.
That's the one I mean. Yeah, the Technics WSA1. That's the one we had. It doesn't really like it. It kind of says it's going to do something that it doesn't really quite do. So,
well, I imagine the processing power involved in this and the kind of mathematical side of it. I think it's the same as happened with electronic instruments. The modelling has become sort of so good. With people like GeForce and also Zills Lab. Just sort of took the component modelling to another level. I think maybe the physical or acoustic modelling is waiting for that, that magic mathematical breakthrough. Sorry, Dave, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of exactly the point. And what's really interesting is that physical modelling was touted as the kind of next big thing in the 90s. And yet here we are kind of 20 years later, and there's been no huge inventive leaps, has there?
Well, I guess
and we've got all of this processing power at our hands.
AAS would probably beg to differ, but I'm not familiar with a lot of their stuff, so I think it's not fair to kind of comment too much.
I just, in a way, it's not become as ubiquitous as you would have thought, given the kind of hype that surrounded it in the early 90s with the Yamaha stuff.
It must have been a heck of a lot of investment in the R&D for that. Sorry, Gaz, yeah?
Well, one of the problems with the sort of the physical modeling since I've played, I played on a Yamaha, the VL1. I borrowed one for a while. Is that programming isn't really that interesting on it, or rather, you've got so many parameters, and you have to. And of course, the interfaces on those things was really restricted. Small little screen, etc. But similarly with like the Alesis Fusion, that came out with it had all the different, it had the FM engine, the analog modeling engine, but it also had a physical modeling section. There was various engines in that, and it was okay. It was a nod in the right direction, but again, when you play around with the parameters, it's
not an enjoyable process.
Not as enjoyable as, say, subtractive synthesis, for instance,
right.
Where you get lots of joy out of it, just manipulating the sounds. That's what I think you would need a different approach, I think, to, maybe like a very graphical thing that's not like adjusting parameters, but maybe just adjusting moods or.
I think that's a very valid point. This topic has had far more legs than I'd anticipated. We should probably now quickly go to a word from our sponsors. Iris were mentioned, of course, so I will quickly. If you stay tuned, we have a winner for last week's podcast, RX3, but we're also going to have another competition this week. So if I play my advert, you will be able to see it. So yes, Isotope Iris. In fact, this is a groundbreaking sample-based synthesizer that had its roots actually on Sonic Talk, which is all I'm very proud of, and so we should be. It's a new spin on sound design. It's a visual instrument that's perfect for inspiration and sonic experimentation. This is music from Glass and various things. Natural, intuitive selection tools. You can manipulate your audio visually. You can see an image of your sound and draw and select individual events. There's shape-shifting, apply synthesis control to your selections and layers, shape and morph new textures, sound sculpting, enjoy warm, lush filters, delays, lots of effects and distortions, plenty of sound libraries as well, mixes of wood, glass, food, toys, voice, altered and prepared objects, as well as crazy modular synthesizers and pitch percussion. You can download a free 10-day demo of Isotope Iris today at isotope.com/Iris, and there's a sale through May 30th on Iris and the Iris Plus 8 bundle, which includes all 8 Iris sound libraries. So do check it out, isotope.com/Iris. And I want to say thank you very much to Isotope for sponsoring the show. And of course, last week we did actually have a competition. And if you recall, the competition was a Twitter-based competition. And the winner is, of RX3, who's won the RX3, is King Vidiot, who I'm pretty sure has been in the chat room a few times. And he is a Twitter user, and he tweeted RX3D Reverb at Sonic Nick and at Isotope Inc. And in fact, we've got another competition this week, and you can win Iris too. So I go here. Here are the instructions. You can win Isotope Iris. With the hashtag, you need to be on Twitter for this. This is the only limitation, but it seems to be going very well, and you could always join just for the heck of it. Hashtag synthesize anything. And at Sonic Nick and at Isotope, I've got a little search that just kind of grabs all of that and gives me a big list, and then I pick a random winner from it. So if you want to enter that competition, go for it. And we will announce, I don't think I'll be able to announce the winner next week because there's no live show because I'm going to a wedding. But I'll do 2 the week after because hopefully we've got an interview being played. So I'll just run that by you again. Tweet the hashtag hashtag synthesize anything at Sonic Nick and at Isotope Inc. So there we are. Thank you very much. Right, gosh, that was an interesting one. Let's have a look. Yes, Robot Band. Why the hell not? We haven't had one of those for a while. This is KX and Z, and this is an astonishing. Basically, this guy. What surprises me more than anything, I mean, the music is fine, and it's, you know, I'm quite happy with it. But the level of work that must have gone into just creating this when you could have done it with MIDI sequencing is just mind-blowing. Let me see if I can fast forward it so it gets going. You can see it starts getting a bit more exciting. There's a lot of instruments that are going on. There's a dope for system. Looks like a System 100, or is that a 700? I can't tell. Here we go. Nice setup. Let's go. Oh yeah. Wow, look at that. That's a System 700, isn't it? And there's a CS15 there as well. I've got one of those over there. Awesome. You can buy that actually. It's the Kinetix is the name of the guy. Robotic drum set and analog bass. You can download it for $1 New Zealand, and he's actually going to be all proceeds from the purchase of this track will go towards a trip to London to present a paper about musical robots in 2014, which I think is a great concept. What I mean, aside from the amount of work that must have gone into this, there's an aspect of kind of man in shed DIY kind of to this, which really fascinates me. I don't know, Gaz, did you find it fascinating? Were you kind of thinking there was a big question mark for me as to why you would, but I'm glad he did, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean it's good fun, isn't it? It sounded like he's putting up a shed actually. The music.
You dropped the drum kit down. The drum kit fell down the stairs. That's always the joke about drum and bass, wasn't it?
But yeah, I mean, it's great, isn't it? I love it when people spend stupid amounts of time doing silly things. It's very good. But it's certainly, I mean, you know, do you remember we covered the Pat Metheny Orchestrion project a couple of years back, and he was essentially, that took this to another level, didn't it? Because it was entirely interactive to the player. So, you know, he could have all sorts of stuff going on, but control it all. But yeah, I mean, great. Yeah, I don't know much more to say. No,
fair enough. I get Rich, you of course saw the Pat Metheny Orchestrion, and I think you told us about you know, the kind of this sort of lumbering, wheezing thing they rolled on stage to kind of make it work. I mean, can imagine I think we talked about the challenges of being the keyboard tech for that gig. Must have been,
or the mechanical tech, worse yet.
Yeah.
But it wasn't lumbering at all. And what was stunning about it is he could play instruments from his guitar live on stage and switch between them as he chose.
Wow.
This was technology on a whole other level. I respect what this guy did that we just played, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And the whole homebrew aspect of it is also romantic to me. But and he wants to present a paper, go watch the Orchestrion tour. They took it from stage to stage, night after night.
Excellent. I can't imagine how much work that was involved. But it's an interesting concept, isn't it? There's a sort of, I don't know what it is in men generally that kind of, and I'm assuming this person is a man. I mean, I may be completely wrong, but there's this sort of obsessive DIY aspect to it. It fascinates me. I don't know, Mark. I'm wondering whether or not you might have a thing or two in, you know.
It's a pioneering kind of aspect, isn't it? It's like, oh, all these things. What can I do to all these things? And what's it? You know, what it's. What I got a sense of when I watched that clip is that it had almost like a consciousness of its own. So I'm guessing that he's not MIDI programming. Some of those oscillators and things are running free, aren't they? So there's
I don't know,
things happening there, and maybe I would love to think that the drums are being programmed by like an LFO with sample and hold, and it's like it's playing those beats because something's randomly kind of kicking off, you know, the little what are they called, relays or whatever. So I mean, I got a feel when you saw about halfway through that when it showed the wall of Moogs. I got a feel like, God, if you were in the middle of that, it would be like being in the presence of another form of consciousness. So it's like he's created a being.
That's an interesting.
But I get another tarot card out.
Yeah, which one?
I mean, no, really, it's just like it's like he's taking it somewhere else. And much as I love Pat Metheny and I do like some of his music, I think I like this better, actually.
You'd rather listen to drum and bass than Major
The
Ninths. I know that.
sounds were really, whoa, yeah. Yeah,
There
great
was,
sound.
just quickly, there is actually, let me see what was on there. Modular system, Roland 100M sub bass, Roland System 700 basses, Dope for system, stabs and atmospheric sound, CS10, not CS15, Studio Electronics Omega 8, chords and atmospheric sound, Korg Monotron Duo, more basses. There's quite a lot of basses in there. I guess it's
It
drum and
reminded
bass.
me a little bit of SPK. Can you remember the band SPK?
I
think a
vaguely
German
do, yeah.
band, from the late 80s, or no, early 80s, actually.
Yes, I think so. It's that sort of like screeching thing. I know, Dave.
Really?
All you need is a couple. If you had like a couple of drums there and a few relays, you'd be there in I don't know, a couple of months.
It's this idea that, because I've always been approached by people who go, "Oh, I've got this idea. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do, and I'm going to do, and I'm going to do," and very few of those actually do. Whereas this guy really did it, didn't he?
Yeah.
He obviously went into his missus and went, "I'm not going to be around for a little while because I've got this idea." And then he did it. And then he must have came out. And it's like, I spoke to Nick Bookman the other day who said that he'd finished building that ARC 2600 kit form, where you have to buy all the individual components and solder it to the board that's supplied. And I think when he finished it, he kind of said to his wife, "Oh, do you want to look at it?" And she went, "No, I couldn't care less." And I wonder whether this guy had the same kind of experience. And, no, aside from that, I thought it was, very good. Although I have to say that djembe annoyed me a little bit, or whatever it was, because I was like, I do love my drum and bass, and it kind of irritated me a little bit. I was like, oh, you could have used a.
There could have been a
else.
juggler.
Anyway,
there could have been a juggler lurking off camera there at any point, couldn't there? Really.
It could have been, yeah. I really liked it. I'm just picking holes for the sake
But good
of it.
stuff, yeah. So if you want to get hold of it, kxnzbandcamp.com/releases. You can buy it for $1 and help support him and get him over here, and he can.
You're not going to support him with $1, though, are you?
No,
You've got
but
to pay at least $10 for it, surely.
Well,
And it says a minimum of $1. I think we should all pay more.
oh, does it say minimum? But I think it just says buy now, $1 New Zealand dollar.
I thought it was you can pay any amount that you like on Bandcamp, can't you?
Okay, well, Mark, you can pay as much as you want then.
I'm going to pay a dollar.
Okay, New Zealand
Just
dollar. I'm
had
not
to
sure
buy
what
my
that.
son a car, so I'm not feeling very flush at the moment.
No, I can imagine that must be a fairly costly experience. Okay, right. Well, I think we'll probably move on to this last topic because it sort of incorporates another couple of things. Because obviously, there was news that there was also Logic release 10.0.7, which has just come out, which is actually gives you what does it give you? Logic Pro updated. I'm sure I had a link for it somewhere. Oh yeah, 12-core support and various other fixes and fiddles and pan and volume values at tape head. I don't know exactly what that means, but Dave, do you know what that means? Have you got it? Because I can't upgrade because I'm still on 10.7.5, so I can't get Logic X.
Do you know, it's really funny. My main machine is, the Lappy that I'm talking to you on is Mavericks, and my main machine is still 10.6.8 because I have to use, I'm always having to go back in time and redo things, and I need this archive. But literally as you said that, this little pop-up's appeared on my main Mac that says, upgrade to Mavericks, upgrade your Mac to the latest version of OS X for free, not now, and then the button that's highlighted is details. And as you were talking about that, I was not really listening to you. I'm sorry. I was just wrestling with which button to push because it's a real major dilemma for me. But no, I've only used Logic X for testing. I'm afraid I know very little about it other than that.
Oh, well, fair enough. But it does link into the other topic, which I know Mark had something to say on, and I'll just play a little bit of this. I don't know how much I can play. I guess it's an advert, so I should be able to play it, right? Well, I'm going to anyway. This has been airing in the UK. This is the sort of Discover Something Great, I think it's called, and it's a bunch of people doing amazing things with apps. And there's a whole list of different apps. And the thing, I've banged on about this in the past, which is that essentially, most of the apps they're showing here, again, even now, are musical and creative. They're not, your traditional sort of workflow enhancement things, and this is the thing that drives all of this technology. Anyway, I'll shut up now and you can hear it. Yeah, I'll probably stop now because that's probably just about enough to get me busted by the YouTube copyright police. But it was more about, I know, Mark, because you were sort of on one a bit about how everything seems to be becoming dumber. And this is perhaps an indicator of that. I don't know if I've got you right. I mean, I hope I'm not misrepresenting you.
No, you're not. I mean, there's two things that's happening that I've noticed. The whole of the internet seems to be switching to great big flash-based graphics so you go to a web page, you've got a whole screen filled with like 5 buttons, and that's all you can do. So that whole way of looking at things, these big square kind of, and I guess it's so that people can use it on mobile devices, that seems to have spread, or touchscreen devices, it's spread onto the computer. So when I have got Logic Pro X, when I open Logic Pro X and I look at it, unless I buy a massive screen, I can't really work on my laptop because I can't see more than a few bars of my song. And everything's been dumbed down and simplified and put under like a great big button that does, like, I click this button and it loads like a whole EQ strip or a whole EQ path for dirty vocal or for I don't know, Flute. We had flutes earlier on, so like you just click buttons and it brings up things. But any of the kind of the core functionality seems to have got hidden away. The strength of Logic, always for me, I've had it since version 1.5. The strength of Logic is the environment. Getting at the environment now seems to be way harder. It's kind of hidden in the background. So we're saying Mac is more creative, and the tools that Mac users get are for more creative purposes, but we're having creativity kind of homogenized. It's almost like in the same way that when I go to a shopping mall, I can almost guess the layout and what shops I'm going to go and find there. When I open my sequencer, I can guess, what instruments I'm going to find there. I'm only going to end up making music in the kind of genre of the building blocks that I'm given to make music in. And then, the bigger kind of picture or the more detailed picture is completely hidden to me. And then I've got one last thing to say about Apple. That I think what they're doing is they're upgrading way too quick. So they've got these upgrade paths for everything. So like the reason I've got Pro X is because I'd try to load something from GarageBand on the iPad into Logic Pro 9, and it said you can't do this anymore, you've got to upgrade. So everything needs to upgrade. There's this kind of constant path of, if you don't upgrade this to this, you can't do that anymore. And then same with Pages. Pages drives me nuts. They've taken half the anything that you could create in Pages in terms of like designing your own layout seems to have disappeared, and they've simplified it. Okay, so it means my mum could make fabulous flyers for her village fete, but if I want to do anything where I'm getting into the finer detail of it, all those functions have literally been taken out of Pages unless they're hidden somewhere, but I don't know how to get to them. So with iOS, they're upgrading so fast that anybody who's paid into the SDK, their $99 a year, probably can't keep up with the process. So I don't know if anyone else has noticed this as a final sort of part of this, is that all of those creative synths and apps and weird little things that do clever things in music are all like disappearing slowly from the iOS, from the iTunes store, and no longer being upgraded. And as these new operating systems come out, all of those apps are sort of slowly breaking. So there was one brilliant one I had called Curtis that was a sample stretchy kind of thing. That's sort of no longer working. And anyway, so on. So
well, I suppose that's the process to a degree of they're not selling enough, so it's not worth putting any more effort into it. So I mean, there is an element of that. I mean, no, Robbie commented on this topic a little bit beforehand, and one of his questions was, essentially to you, Dave. As a developer, would you prefer to support older OS or have to continue to develop for newer ones? Which end of the spectrum is best?
It's interesting. I quite liked reading that because we've reached a point now where I'm reasonably happy, but there is a balance to be found. And I think, you do have to support old OSs to a point. But you see, most of my thoughts are based on not really what goes on here, because for that we have to keep up with all new iOSs, but it's really what most proper pro working musicians I know use and need to continue to use in order to work. And that, until very recently, has been 10.6.8.
Yeah.
And like I said, my main desktop is 10.6.8 because I need access to, I couldn't afford Final Cut Pro, so I use Final Cut Express. Redmatica, the Keymap Pro thing, is absolutely essential to me. So I need that. I also need to revisit projects in exactly the same way as various bands that I work with need to keep revisiting projects to do, a new mix for a TV sync or something like that where the money is. So there needs to be this balance. And sometimes I get the feeling that this kind of, I think I understand why companies like Apple are always, like next, because they employ those kind of people who are always, hungry for the next kind of thing or do the next thing. But I also think it's a case of the industry kind of reinvents itself, but purely for financial reasons all the time. Okay, so let's do this. Let's deprecate that. So all those people now have to upgrade to this and pay this, which is why I was really surprised when I got this upgrade message on my 10.6.8 to say Mavericks for free. And I noticed, I'm going to have to make the move, or in fact, what I'm probably going to end up doing is buying another computer, because
what do you want to watch out for?
I can't
when you get
lose.
Mavericks for free, Mavericks forces upgrade paths to lots of other things you've got to pay for. So you just, I don't know.
Watch out.
Well, it's things like
suddenly,
Chris and I communicate all day, every day via iChat, and I'm losing that. So I'll lose that.
What I want. So, my main point is it a step forward to put less information on the screen in bigger blocks, or were we better off? So here's an exercise to try.
I think
take your current big screen, which is 1920 by whatever it is pixels, plug it into a Mac running OS 9 and boot it, and then look and see how much information you can see on the screen at once about what you're working on. Then put that screen back on your modern Mac with Logic Pro X and see how much information you can see on your screen then.
I think
I'm pretty graphics, great big things, but absolutely no usability at all.
I disagree with you completely, 100%.
Excellent. I'm glad you did.
I like as little information on the screen as possible. I think it's just, I think, if you can get at the complexity and you use shortcuts and whatever to do that, the actual working screen, I want it to be as uncluttered and so I think that the move to Logic, I've been a real hater of Logic, but I quite like it now because of these kind of, I think it's a lot nicer environment to work in. It's more creative. It's easier. It's a lot easier. I used to call Logic illogic because I found that the workflow was very strange, and there's lots of very small text and little drop-down menus.
Yeah.
And I think now. So yeah. So
well,
I think
it's the same with iTunes. If you look at iTunes, they've got like a whole sub menu that's just hidden and disappeared. And the same with Firefox. Actually, they've done it with Firefox. It's impossible to find the menus on anything anymore.
Well, I mean,
but
the thing is also, as music professionals or people who have a workflow and do what we do, we're constantly refining it, maybe refining our auto load so that when it comes up, it's as we expect it, we can work to it. And surely isn't what's happening is a lot of that is just being absorbed into the core basic kind of what happens when you boot the program up via Apple. I know, Rich, I mean, you kind of... You must have, when you boot up Pro Tools somewhere else and it's not as you look at, or do you know what I mean? You're kind of getting it to the way that you need it to look. I mean, they haven't. I don't know whether there's been various looks. They darkified the interface and what have you, but I mean, people are always going to be upset when the interface drastically changes because it immediately things that are instinctive are no longer immediately so, right?
Absolutely. And I have a lot to say about a lot of the points that have been made, so let me step back a few. To go to the original question of whether or not one computer is inherently more creative than the other, the answer is no. Computers are computers, and you can be creative in any one of them you choose, just as long as you are willing to navigate its own particular quirks. And now onto those quirks. Across the length of time, Apple has gone to what I originally referred to as a shopping mall kiosk model of operating system, which is, I think, what Mark is describing, where everything is even more icon-driven, and now it's touchscreen and icon-driven, and you have a lot less available to you on the screen because those icons have to be of a certain size to be useful. And because Apple computers stressed ease of use for beginning users more so than their competitors, they became known as the arts computers, because the arts people weren't necessarily that computer savvy, but wanted to be able to work on computers right away. So they took to the Apple like, a fish to water, and across a decade or a decade and a half, that became sort of entrenched in the creative, quote unquote, world as the computer those people use, while the entire rest of the planet is using this other one over here. But the computers themselves are not creative or less creative. It's just that the people using them apply them in the ways that they're comfortable. Now that whole thing is starting to level off as more people become more computer savvy. And Apple's gained a larger foothold, although not a majority foothold, in the desktop market. And Windows is trying to gain a larger foothold in the tablet and all that other markets that Apple is killing everybody in right now. So that's sort of my short synopsis. Then there was the whole thing about apps and how did apps go to a single screen interface, and we have to remember the influence of Ableton Live and how it came about. And shortly after it appeared with a single screen interface instead of all these multiple screens for multiple edit windows. Everybody else was writing their thing to look like that, including Logic, and Logic did that. And as regards using presets, I could swear it was you who told us like a week or two ago that you were using some kind of voice preset signal path on a Line 6 product. Yeah. Mark, wasn't that the case?
I put it to you, Mr. Tinley.
I might have.
Didn't you say that like a week or two ago?
I was saying that, but I want to have the choice. I don't want to be forced to use that path. And actually finding the plugins in Pro X has been like really discombobulating. I'm going to use that word.
But you can modify what they use it as a starting point, like any other preset you've ever called up.
Yeah, but I think that's what I was saying about, that's that, unfamiliarity. It just kind of, you think, oh, God, this is in the way. I just want to put like a 4-bar beat down and thrash this idea I've got out, but I can't because I have to figure out where all this stuff is.
But here's another thing. If you look at the support, the level of support for creative products, so in the Apple world, we've got the iOS devices, and then we've got all these people writing these nifty little synths and things for iOS, and they're kind of fun, but they're not very integratable. And having just switched back to the PC, what I've noticed about the PC is that in terms of the creative people who support the things, in terms of creative people who are creating software plugins and stuff, there's thousands and thousands of VST plugins that do all sorts of weird things that I look at them and I think, oh, hang on a minute, that looks like unbelievably useful. So there's clever people out there who are creative, who are creating solutions to everyday studio problems and coming up with really good ways of doing it, and then only making that available for VST because they've maybe done it in synth edit or something. And in terms of Mac versus PC,
you can still play VSTs in Mac, and certainly in Reaper, or use VSTs, and there are.
Well, only if they're Mac VSTs.
Yes, well, that's true, but that's
sure, Ableton does.
Yeah,
and
there are a lot of things on the PC that just aren't possible on the Mac, I've noticed. And then if I want to be creative with those things on the Mac, I can't. Wow. I have to run an emulator.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like Reaper is the software for you, though, Mark. To be honest,
go Gaz.
Because I agree. I'm really getting into Reaper. I'm dropping Logic. I'm going with Reaper. I'm using Ableton more. I'm using Reaper. Those are kind of my two at the moment, I think.
Reaper is sort of the most cutting edge DAW out there.
And is that still being developed at the same sort of pace that it was when I jumped on for? I haven't upgraded for ages.
It's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. Oh, do you know what? And I was at somebody's house the other day, and I told them that they should be using Reaper and installed it on their machine, showed it to them and everything. They had a Windows 8.1 computer with a touch screen. I reached out and I went like this. Then I thought, oh no, of course that won't work, and it did. And it's all, loads of it is touchscreen enabled as well. So they're way ahead of the curve on loads of these things. So yeah, Reaper,
Yeah. Well,
definitely
there we go.
brilliant.
Can I just bring this to a close?
Yes.
With something
Yeah.
with something I put on Facebook today. It's actually taken from the Daily Mash, which I love. And it was that Apple have admitted that the iWatch is never going to happen because it was the result of a Thursday night pub crawl.
Excellent. If only that were true, wouldn't that be great? Fantastic. That's excellent. I don't know if anybody got my email about tips. I don't know whether, because it seemed to go down very well last week, but I understand if it's not been, nobody has anything prepared, we can perhaps do it another time, but that's so it's not so much of it. Although I have one. The one tip that I had was, this was something I was doing. I was using the Jupiter 6 for a load of parts playing into a DAW of my choice, which was in fact Logic, probably at the time. And I couldn't automate some stuff, so I just opened the filter right up and then automated a plug-in filter across it so I could get it all in time and stuff. And that's so you just use the raw waveforms, play it in, and then affect the audio, automate it with additional plugins, which is, fairly basic stuff, but it's something.
I got one.
Oh,
I got
okay.
one. If you're working on a song and it's lacking vibe, everything sort of seems to be in the right place from a mix point of view, but it's just lacking some sort of, sex factor. The thing is missing, the mojo. Then a really cool thing is make a mix down of the song, but import that mix back into your song and then maybe duplicate that mix about 5 or 6 times. Chuck it into a folder if you've got that facility on your DAW. Otherwise, mute the tracks. Solo them one at a time and apply them with like heavy amounts of processing. Like maybe like really, really thin it out with an EQ or filter. Or on another track, add loads of flanger or something. Just mess up each one and then keep them muted. Then, as you're playing your track, unmute them one at a time and just ride the fader up just a little bit, and just try it. And by having the effect across the whole mix, it just does strange things as you pull it in, and maybe you find the mojo that way.
Okay, that's good. I remember in the old days it used to be pull all the faders down and start again. It's not happening. I'm going to pull all the faders down, and everyone will go, no. But
Yeah.
you remember that, Mark? That moment?
I do indeed, yeah. I think turning things off is sometimes the key, because you've got to try and ascertain what the most important part of the thing that you're working on is. And I tend to start off with something. I've got like a picture in my mind, or maybe it's not a picture, it's a sound. I can kind of create sound in my mind. So I create this idea of what it's going to sound like. I start working on it, and it just goes in a totally different direction. And then if I can go back to the beginning, remember what it was that I was trying to create, and then switch everything off and then bring in only those elements which fit my mental picture of it. And then you'd always be willing to discard things. I mean, and I'm as guilty of this. I'm like a digital hoarder. I have songs with 100 tracks in them with all little snippets and things where I've tried sketching out ideas, and then I've gone, oh, that's not quite working. But then I keep it in and turn it down and then think, oh, it needs something else. It needs something else. It needs something else. It needs something else. It's like, be willing to get rid of things that are sketches and try and only keep in the things which fulfill the original song's purpose. And by purpose, I mean the original, and it's not visualized, audioalized.
Right.
Is that a word?
Yeah, that'll do.
The original concept that you audioalized. Try and keep the elements that do that, and then keep trying to work towards that. All the other stuff that comes along the way, yeah, great. I mean, use that for the remix maybe, but try and create the thing the way you saw it when you started.
That's wise words indeed. I don't know if anyone else wants to chip in, or whether I should work on rounding up now. Speak or forever hold your peace. It's 5:15 on Wednesday afternoon. I've got to go and watch my daughter perform in a recorder recital a little bit later, so I'm going to have to chip off. So I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us. Very much appreciate it. Before we go, I think I should just reiterate the Isotope competition. Remember, you can win Isotope Iris, #synthesize anything, and at Sonic Nick and at Isotope Inc. If your tweet is just that would be enough. But feel free to add comments as well. It's always nice to get a bit of comments, or maybe a link to the show as well, because then it gets the word out there. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure as ever. So we'll start with saying goodbye to you, Dave. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it, and I hope it's cooled down in your room. The fan in your MacBook has stopped. At least your A to Z of synthesizers hasn't spontaneously combusted, as it lifted some of the laminate off the...
Actually, Pete Forrest is coming here tomorrow.
Really?
Is he?
Yes, he's dropping off something that we bought at Vimeo.
Oh, for goodness sake. Let's have some self-control, man.
Have you seen that little cartoon, that little meme that's doing the round, and it's like a Pinocchio with sort of big nose, and it's just got the caption, "I will not buy any more gear."
I haven't seen that. I mean, I can talk. I bought the IntelliGel Atlantis that we had in for review, and I can't stop myself. And I've got a couple of other things to go, but I'm really hankering after a microbrute. I don't know why. I just feel I would like to have one. There's Rich Hilton nodding away. Yes, I've had one in the building before. Yes. Rich has still got his with him. Oh, he's just picking. Oh, look at that.
Broken it.
Anyway, Rich, thank you also for joining us as well. Hiltonius.com, and I'm guessing he's off to the studio to wax a hottie or plan some kind of international travel.
Actually, I'm going to Telefunken microphones today.
Ah, okay, because they're
with my son, the audio student musician guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I hope you enjoy that. That sounds fun. And thank you very much to Gaz Williams, gazwilliams.me. We'll see you later in the week for our Bitwig Fest. And yes, I don't know if you actually saw that since last week we posted the Nectar Panorama P4 with Bitwig as well. So if you want to see any more of that action, please carry on. But anyway, Gaz, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time. And finally, Mr. Mark Tinley there in his radio studio.
Those chaps in the chat room have made me think about something else.
Okay.
They're talking about Motorola chips and PowerPC, and so I think another thing that happens if you're on the Mac platform is that Mac or Apple, not deliberately, from time to time, Apple pull the rug out from under your feet and leave you with no
route
foundation for backwards compatibility. And with the PC, there always seems to... I can run... in Windows 8.1, I can run everything in compatibility mode back to Windows 95, and it seems to work quite well. Whereas with Mac, they run along for a while. They're going like, oh, we've got this processor, and suddenly then they've got... they go, oh, we're going to switch everything to PowerPC. This is the way to go. And then we had to... All our programs broke, basically.
Yeah,
do you remember that? At the beginning of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, just everything stopped working or worked really slow.
I do remember that.
The mouth. And then we did that for a while, and then they did exactly the same with the Intel processors, and then they dropped Rosetta. Now, I think they dropped Rosetta way too fast, because if you look at XP, and the support for XP just ended after 15 years. If I look at my my Mac that runs Rosetta, that's 6 years old, so I think they killed it after about 6 or 7 years. I think, and if anybody's bought into that and they're running a business off it, you're in serious trouble if you're running a business off a computer that's no longer supported after 6 years. It's just, naughty, or very naughty, Apple.
Well, on that final word, appreciate that. Thank you very much. Also want to say there is no live show next week. I'm hoping we will have an interview with Mr. Axel Hartmann, who is a industrial designer specialising in synth GUIs and user interface and what have you. So I'm hoping we have that online by the time, because I'm going to be away for a couple of days next week. So there will be no results for the competition this week. But the week after, hopefully I'll have a result for 2 lots of competitions, if you see what I mean. So I want to say thank you very much to everybody for joining us. And I'm going to play out, actually, because I found this audio demo of some more. This was the tenor sax from the same guys that did the flutes. So that's sample modelling. I'll see if I play that, and then I'll do a fade out. So I'll play that now. No saxophone here, of course, but I think it comes in a bit. Great orchestration. I don't know if this is all sample libraries. It sounds fantastic. There it is. Lovely. This is by Van Heusen and Burke. Performed by Iwan Roth using the SM Swam tenor saxophone.